I'm Nana Akua. It's time now for the great British debate this hour, and I'm asking, will issues surrounding Israel be Labour's undoing? Sir Keir Starmer is facing growing pressure from within the Labour Party as 150 Labour Muslim councillors have signed a letter to the party leader urging him to call for an immediate ceasefire. Now, this comes as London Mayor Sadiq Khan and Scottish Labour leader Nana Akua have both released videos calling for a ceasefire in the conflict, piling pressure onto the Labour leader. Now, Sir Keir Starmer has remained relatively calm and on the same page as the Prime Minister on the issue, but much of the anger has been to some of his supporters within the party who believe in Palestine and believe in the cause. Following critics and the crisis talks on Wednesday with Labour's Muslim MP cohort in a bid to keep the party intact, Starmer released a statement outlining how aid to Gaza was completely insufficient and had to be urgently ramped up. However, senior figures abandoning the party policy is threatening the party's unity and is proving to be Sir Keir Starmer's greatest leadership test yet. So, for the great British debate this hour, I'm asking, will issues surrounding Israel be Labour's undoing? So joining me now to discuss is Anne Widdecombe. She's a member of Reform UK, Gary Mond, chairman for the Jewish National Assembly, and Stephen Pound, former Labour MP. Right, I'm going to start with you. Gary Mond, what do you take on that?
My take on that is that the majority of the Labour Party are not with Keir Starmer on this. There's actually one interesting group of people that hasn't been referred to, and that is Labour's prospective parliamentary candidates who are in potentially winnable seats for the next election. Currently, Labour's got 200 MPs. Most opinion polls think they'll end up with 400 to 450 after the next election. What do the 200 to 250 potential future Labour MPs think? And I strongly suspect that they're very much opposed to Keir Starmer's view. There is, regrettably, substantial support for Hamas and Palestinian nationalism within the Labour Party, and it's very much against the interests of the State of Israel.
But Gary, seeing that, and as you said just there's a lot of seemingly support for the Palestinian cause within the party. Do you think then, especially with the troubles that they've had with anti-Semitism, that this could be something that could destabilise the party?
I think that there is a strong possibility that Labour will appear very divided on this, and destabilising is probably the right word to use. Yes, I'm old enough to remember a situation in 1981 when Labour won a GLC election and the candidate who actually was their leader was removed in favour of Ken Livingstone. And I'm just wondering whether Keir Starmer might be in trouble if after he wins a general election, whether there might actually be an attempt to remove him on this very issue.
Well, that's if he wins it. Anne Widdecombe, what's your thought?
Well, obviously, this is not making his life any easier, and he is between a rock and a hard place. Whichever way he goes, he's going to upset the others. And I think, therefore, it's got to be a question of principle. He's got to stay where he is on the issue, which is in favour of the Israeli action, but also in favour of getting humanitarian aid to Gaza. That's perfectly compatible. But the question really is, how much is this going to gain traction between now and the next general election? And the previous two speakers spoke about the general election, but the fact is that it's not due probably until next October, and that's a very long time. I mean, in that time, we'll probably have the ground invasion, then we're going to have the aftermath. And the aftermath could be even more challenging than the present situation. So, yes, I think he's in trouble. But if he can show strength over this one, it will do him some good. But yes, he is in trouble.
But he's already wavering, though, because he's you can sort of see him sort of trying to soften his stance now, and he's worried about the party. I mean, Stephen Pound, what's your thoughts on it?
I have to say, Nana, my first reaction is, compared to the absolute utter horror of what Hamas has committed in Israel and what is happening in Gaza today, the internal machinations of the Labour Party seem utterly irrelevant. But this is the question you're asking. You're quite entitled to ask this very question. The answer is it will not cause the downfall of the Labour Party. It will not affect our chances. We're actually up to 29 points leads in today. However, it is a very, very unfortunate and unhappy reminder of how life was under the Corbyn era. And we don't need that. But what's important is that we actually start to discuss the realities. People are calling for a ceasefire, are reacting emotionally and understandably. But you know and I know that we can have a ceasefire tomorrow if Hamas would release prisoners, release the hostages, and say we will sit down, or so Iran would actually instruct Hamas to sit down and talk about a two-state solution. Until then, we've got an emotional spat instead of a detailed, respectful political position.
Well, I mean, it is a bit of a nonsense, Gary, that people are calling for a ceasefire, because a ceasefire, it's unlikely that Hamas will take any notice of that. So what you're asking is for Israel to lay down its arms and allow Hamas to carry on. So it does seem a bit odd, but there are those within the party, the Labour Party, that are calling for that, and people resigning as a result of that. And I think that the optics for someone who's thinking about voting for them, especially somebody who's in, support of Israel, whilst they may feel that Keir Starmer is honourable and they agree with him, they might look at the party and think, well, hang on a minute, if it's filled with people who actually want to support Palestine, perhaps I don't want to vote for them. Gary, do you think that's...
I think you're spot on. I think you're spot on. But there is an added point to make here, and that is that Hamas will not release hostages unless they get something for it. And what they're looking for is something like between 5,000 and 6,000 terrorists who are held in Israeli jails to be released in exchange for the hostages. That's what they're angling towards. And that is something that I don't believe the Israeli government would ever agree to. And I certainly wouldn't support it.
But we can't trust them anyway. They might say that, but then even if... I mean, is there a track record that they would actually honour the commitment if these 5,000 prisoners were released? I doubt it.
No. You summed it up earlier on. The idea of a ceasefire, it sounds a good optic, but the Israelis would feel that they have lost the war if they agreed to a ceasefire now, because what you'd be doing is you would be leaving Hamas intact, giving it a chance to rearm and regroup, to only attack again in a year or 2 years from now, on a scale that may be even worse than happened on the 7th of October. And that must not be allowed to happen. Hamas must be destroyed.
But is it realistic? I want to bring Jake Wallace in now. Jake Wallace-Simmons, he's the editor of the Jewish Chronicle. Jake, is it realistic, though, I'm behind Israel 100% because I feel that you have to do what you need to do. I don't want anyone to die, but I do believe that Israel has absolutely every right to defend itself. I also don't believe I'm in any position to tell or dictate to Israel what that defence should be. And, of course, I want them to be considerate to the humans that will be caught up in all of this. That's how it has to be, in my view. But do you feel that even if Israel go in and they supposedly destroy Hamas, is that objective actually realistic?
I think that we need to look at other examples throughout history where, in particular, I'm thinking of Operation Against Islamic State. And in 2016-17 and thereafter, the RAF and other allies from the Americans and the Iraqis and so on engaged in a very, very robust operation, if I can use that word, against Islamic State. In the Battle of Mosul alone, in 2017-18, 11,000 civilians were killed after a siege pounding by the RAF and the Iraqis going in. And now we don't face as much of an Islamic State threat as we used to. It's, to all intents and purposes, it has been destroyed. There are pockets of Islamic State in Africa and in the Middle East, but they are not functioning in the same way as they were, which was as a proper pseudo-government and a standing army, pseudo-standing army. I think that we could hope it would be the same thing in Gaza, or the Israelis, although it's not going to be easy.
And do you think that Sir Keir Starmer within the Labour Party, do you think that what's happening within the Labour Party and the fact that people are resigning because of his stance, do you think that that's a risk for the Labour Party and that it could actually destabilise them?
I think it's a massive risk. There was some YouGov polling which came out last week, which showed that whereas amongst Conservative voters, about 40% of people supported the Israelis against something like 6% in favour of the Palestinians. When it comes to Labour voters, it's pretty much the opposite. I think it was 27% supported the Palestinians and about 9% supported the Israelis. And those figures are going to have become even more extreme over the last week since, with the protests and everything else. So Labour leadership is in a very different position compared to the grassroots of the parties Labour voted.
Yeah.
Now, there is a further bit of polling being carried out which shows that people have a very dim view of Hamas across the board. But that's not really what this is becoming. This is becoming about Israel versus Palestine, if you like, in those crude terms. People are forgetting that it's about this terror group, which is akin to Islamic State and what they did. So I think this does represent a very serious problem for the Labour leadership. Keir Starmer has tried very hard to move his party to the centre, to root out, in his terms, anti-Semitism from his party, certainly from the parliamentary party. But this is a stark reminder of just how far there is still to go in terms of the Labour voters, the electorate, the people who would get his MPs into office and him over the line as Prime Minister. Is a serious, serious problem.
But also, and final word to you, Anne, we've also got Sadiq Khan, and of course you've got the Labour leader in Scotland as well, Nana Akua, all, sort of putting pressure on Sir Keir Starmer. And they've got quite a population underneath them who they're representing.
Indeed, and it is all putting pressure on him. And as I said, it's not making his life any easier. But this is now a test for Starmer. Is he going to try and appease everybody, which is completely impossible in the current situation? Or is he going to say clearly, this is not about Palestine, it's about terrorism. That's what we're dealing with. That's why I support the government. That's what he should say. And that's why I'm continuing with the line I'm taking. But that is the challenge for him. He's not terribly stalwart in times of challenge. We've seen him go into policy reverse after policy reverse. That's the normal way he goes. This time he can't. This time he has got to take a very clear line and stick to it and tell his party.
Well, it'll be interesting. Well, it'll be interesting if he does. Well, so final question to each of you, yes or no. Will the Israel situation be Labour's undoing? Anne Widdecombe, yes or no?
Possible.
Stephen Pound, yes or no?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely no. Jake Wallace, yes or no?
Jake Wallace-Simons, I think it has been Labour's undoing over the years. Whether it will be the final death blow, I don't think so. I think Starmer will struggle on. He can't be decapitated at this point. Let's wait and see what happens at the election.
Yeah, well, interesting. And what about you, Gary Mond, yes or no?
Not right now, but it might well be a few months from now.
Oh, really? So you think potentially it will be the overall party's undoing? Interesting. Thank you very much.
It will cause major problems.
Jake Wallace-Simons, editor of the Jewish Chronicle, and Widdecombe, member of Reform UK, Gary Mond, chairman for the Jewish National Assembly, and Stephen Pound, former Labour MP. Thank you very much.